powerful. Our staff for years has prided themselves on the idea that we go to the ends of the earth for kids, sometimes at that sacrifice to ourselves. And so that oxygen mask was really a helpful analogy. It gave a lot of our staff members permission for the first time to really kind of take care of themselves. And by taking care of themselves, they were going to be in a better place for kids. And so I thought that was really, really helpful. I think our wonderful support through the Hearts program came at a perfect time. We were all set, people were ready, they had some knowledge. A lot of the teachers talked about the difference between that lizard and that wizard brain, knowing that when kids are in their lizard brain, I might be there as well, and we're not going to have a very productive conversation. And so giving kids space, choice, time, just those kind of things will help a whole lot more than I'm the teacher and I'm right, and so you need to do what I say. Not that was a common theme, but it was really kind of, we put some parameters to that. And then it came to us at a perfect timing. We had by far the most impactful year in my 30 years in last year at our school. And so to have that support there for staff and for students in a really, really difficult time was so very powerful, very powerful. Last year, they gave us some strategies, and I talked to some of the teachers about what were the strategies that really helped. And a couple of them were giving kids space, right? When kids get in wherever they are from the trauma that they've been through, is to give them space. You know, we don't have to press, and we don't have to press. Our staff has always prided themselves on building relationships. We're like a family. But we pushed it even harder to try and make connections. One of the words that I think I first heard from Megan was we got to connect and then redirect. And in the classroom, it's really easy for our teachers to connect. But in the hallways, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to connect, right? And so often our staff would just say, hey, you need to be, hey, you need to be. And some of the language, the simple things like, hey, how are you? What's going on today? Now where are you supposed to be? And so that idea of just kind of that connect before you redirect kids was really, really helpful. The other thing that's been really good for me is, I'm sure our district's the only one that has a lot of initiatives. Everybody else probably just has one, right? But the trauma-informed care really is going to kind of help us connect culturally relevant instruction along with the trauma care. You know, let's give kids some choice. Let's create relationships. Let's look at it from an asset-based rather than deficit-based. I thought that was really, really helpful. It's kind of taken our relationships to the next level. Some of the strategies, the connection circles, the restorative justice piece, has really allowed a lot of our relationships to kind of go to a next level, which has been really, really helpful. And then we have an initiative in our district around innovation. And really, the idea of innovation is it's new and it's productive. It's new and it's useful. And so for us, this trauma lens for students is new to a lot of us, and it really is productive. And it just can kind of lead to some choices in the classroom. So that's kind of where the positive has been. There's been some challenges, absolutely. One of them is kind of confronting that idea of we talk a lot about it, but are we walking the talk? And so it provides the language, but sometimes that language can be a cover for, well, I'll say this in public, but privately maybe I believe something else. Maybe I don't believe the kids are doing the very best they can. And so that's been a challenge, certainly. And I think with the turnover of the staff, right, we learned a whole lot in our first year. And now we have 40 new people. So how do we catch up and move forward all at the same time? And so that really that's a challenge as well. So, and I think sometimes in the whispers in the background, I hear some of our staff say, you know, things like, "Are we just letting kids get away with it? Is this an excuse?" And so I feel like when adults reach that point, like, oh man, enough is enough, well, our brain goes to the easy part. And the easy part is like, well, you know, they really should just be able to follow the rules. They should just be able to fill in the blank. And so that's that. Lots of conversations around that as we move forward. So that's one person's statement.
Can you hear me as well? Are we good? Microphone back there? Are we good? All right, thank you. So I'll just pick up and just say what he said. Go ahead, your turn. So really, I guess if I think about anything that I would add in addition to what Jeff said, if I was to distill it down to maybe a few things, I think one of the really critical pieces for us is that we do have some common language now. And people, instead of just like, what's wrong with that kid, are really starting to try and step back and say what happened to them. I think that really has given us a different way to help shift, and sometimes I believe if we just at least shift the language, even if our thinking is not right there, the thinking can kind of come along, and when we say some things, and when we can actualize what they look like in the space where we are with students. And so one of the things that I found is that a lot of teachers who, prior to our training, didn't really talk to me about some of the personal challenges that they had, started coming to me, and it was like it was okay now to acknowledge that, yes, as people living in this society, you also have some trauma that you may be bringing in, and that may impact or even potentially escalate the trauma of some of the students that you're working with. And so I really think that when Jeff speaks to this training coming to us at a critical time, honestly, in reality, it could not have come at a better time. And in many, many ways, it saved the life of prayer because of what it was able to foster amongst the adults with each other, and what it was able to foster with not every adult. They didn't take these things. And not just with adults primarily, but certainly with many students. It was able to save some really critical relationships. Really make us do a lot of self-observation and some self-reflection and really think about what is the interplay between what we bring and what kids bring. And I just think that for us, we were able to open up a space even for adults to come together and just talk about how tough the year was. We had people who were first year folks in our building come to people like Jeff who's been there, sort of like he carries the mantle, so to speak. And to myself, this is my 4th year in the building. But I think really overall the impact that it's had in terms of being able to shift the thinking, or at least help people step back and say, what did I miss? What am I missing? When I look at a student's written assignment, for example, what do I notice now that I didn't notice before? What am I concerned about now that I wasn't concerned about before? Or what did I let slide before? And because I thought of it in a different kind of capacity than the way I think about it now. I think that's really been some of the critical pieces for us. And then just having the expertise to consult with and to step in places where we really feel like we need a person maybe somewhat one step removed from some of the interpersonal relationships with the other teachers in the building has been absolutely incredible for us. So I think it's been a way for us to not only just look at what the challenge is that kids bring, but also certainly the restorative piece that we embedded in that, and then without question, I think certainly for many of us, what does that say about our Black and brown kids in particular when they have a different level of trauma or additional trauma that's coming into the space because of the skin they walk in? And what's it look like for LGBTQI plus students? And what is the trauma that may be unfolding for them as they go through a process of really being comfortable with the skin that they're in as well? So I think it's really helped us to look at many pieces in many ways.
Well, I'm in a little bit of a different position because I recently left the school that I started at, where I started with Hearts, and I've moved on to a new school as an administrator there. But what I can tell you is that as I was leaving one school and getting ready to go to another was that quotes from teachers that resonated with me, and the biggest one that resonated with me was that if it weren't for hearts, I wouldn't still be a teacher. Many of our teachers said that as we were thinking about like what components do they need to carry on themselves without me being at the helm at that particular school. Students also would talk to me and tell me that I was a wizard. And when I asked more about why, it was because when they were so mad that they didn't even think they could calm down, I was able to help them get to that place where they were back in control. So they felt like there was some sort of magic that happened to that. All those things could never have been done without my learning and my growth through the Harvard program. I can implement all their systems and all the different pieces that work in place, but what really has happened is that my lens of how I respond and how I treat kids has changed fundamentally, and I can never go back to the way I once was. I first always let kids give me their story. They always need to be the ones that are heard. And then once I hear their story and we start to dig into what was going on and how maybe we could have thought about things differently, and then what skills they need to build to get there, I'm much more able to reach them and support them when thinking about how to make those changes so that they can feel more successful. So I guess that's the biggest piece that I've learned and that I carry with me every place I go, is that like I hear their story and I support them, I support teachers, and I help all of you work through it so that we can best make sure our kids learn in any situation.
Don't you want her to say something? I'm Jenn Murtha. I'm the principal at Lansing. I don't think it's possible for me to talk about Hearts without first talking about the story of Lansing. We've only done 2 years of Hearts, so we're kind of a baby Hearts school. And we are exactly, we're 85% free and reduced lunch, Title I. We are really a diverse community. And Hearts came to me my second year there. And they said, here's this great system. We're going to do book clubs on reaching and teaching children who are hurt, which I recommend that book for anyone, particularly people in education. We're going to eat up a whole lot of your PD time and talk about trauma-informed practice. We'd also like to eat up some of your PD time and do like yoga with teachers. And then also, we'd like to take lots of your time to plan all of these things. So I was like, probably not. That's going to happen there. And then I started to watch my children, and they needed a connection. They needed to be beyond punitive measures. We needed to talk about implicit and explicit bias in a very real way at our school. And I knew that this was the venue that we were going to get that done. And so we have. We're still working on it. We don't have it all figured out. But our second year in Hearts, which was last year, well, let me talk about the first year. So the first year, I had to kind of come around on some things, right? Like, I was in priority improvement. I was not willing to give up a lot of PD time. Definitely wasn't going to give up PD time for art response and yoga for teachers. That wasn't happening, right? And then a Hearts consultant came to me and showed me some research about the brain and said, if you don't reset, you can probably plan on losing most of your staff. And I said, well, I don't want to do that. So, okay, you get to do that. And the feedback that first year was incredible from teachers. Like, finally you're recognizing our needs. Finally someone is saying, thank you for listening to the whole teacher, the whole child. We're on the right path, let's keep going. We decreased our attendance issues by 25% that year. We moved into performance that year. We did have a significant amount of turnover, that's my issue. And then we reduced our suspensions and our referrals by 10% in 1 year. And that's doing nothing differently. We didn't implement a new behavior system, we didn't implement new PBIS measures, nothing. We just had Hearts. And so just being informed was the difference. And then the last year was a really hard year for us. We went into turnaround. And there were so many people in our, if you've ever been in turnaround before, everyone starts to live at your building and you're kind of not the greatest people ever because clearly you need help. And so we had 10 of the toughest kids I have ever worked with. We call them at Lansing, we call them the kids we love the most. And you know, exactly the backgrounds you can imagine. We cut our staff by almost 8% because of budget cuts in the district. So we had no tier 2 support, none. We had dwindling tier 3 support. We were literally surviving. And here's the data I can share with you from last year. We had 0 teacher turnover. We had 0 classified turnover, which is almost unheard of. We got out of turnaround. We're in barely hanging on in improvement, because I know someone's back there Googling and see. But we're in improvement, right? And so for us to be in that much of a crisis last year, and still come out of it with some level of resilience, we're starting with sort of justice work. I mean, that's hearts. That's not the principal. That's hearts. So because there's consultation for teachers, because we have a peace corner in every single classroom, because we have a planning center where kids can go and just kind of de-escalate and then get back to class, because we have parent classes, because we are working as a staff on the similar language, like I heard you at Prairie talk about, that's the reason we're in the situation that we're in. Like I said, we're a baby school, we're just learning that that's the evidence that it is effective.
That's great. I'm so excited to hear that. I want to start with some of the questions from here. We are going to take questions from also from you all if you have questions that come up. But we have some here that I want to make sure we get to. So whoever wants to answer this is fine, but I kind of feel like you should answer it because you just said you have a peace corner in every classroom. So how do you make it so the peace corner isn't a play place or word avoidance? And what do you do if kids do use it that way?
So I can definitely answer that. We also have a whole room that's a giant peace corner called the planning center, which is what we just call it. When your feelings are too big, you need the room to go to. It's just like anything else in your classroom. When you introduce it, you just show all the pieces and parts. You teach them around how to use it and how not to use it. And then you have really fair, immediate consequences when it doesn't happen. For example, I have a couple of students in my school that the planning center is not, which is just our giant peace corner. That's just not a place for them to de-escalate. That de-escalates them. So we need a different strategy for that. And yes, I mean, kids busted up a beanbag 3 weeks ago, right? It happens, right? You have to just be like, okay, well, what can we learn from that? And this is still valuable for us. It's a teaching opportunity, just like any behavior event. But mostly kids are very respectful of it. Some teachers have timers with it. Some teachers have like those little seating timers that you go up and down with, so you can sit and look at it. Some teachers' peace corners are amazing with like pillows and lava lamps and all kinds of things. And some teachers are like, there's your chair and 5 books and a squishy toy, right? Like, I mean, it's the spectrum of whatever the teacher's comfortable with, and that's okay with me. I just want a place where kids can take a break and then re-enter.
Thanks. Anybody else want to answer something about that?
I was just thinking about our classroom that is for SED kids, significant emotional disability kids. One of the teachers had a phenomenal corner with a beanbag and like this big sort of artificial plant that was as tall as a tree almost, but it drove like these purple lights, I think they were purple, across it, so it made it really kind of calming and soothing. I think one of the things that happened is he had to, like, that was sort of the space, like kids really kind of knew it, even in that classroom. And I was in there often, I never saw kids sort of abuse it, as I'm just trying to avoid work, like they were really trying to there. That was in a space where all the kids were dysregulated 99% of the time. So.
Thanks a bunch. Okay, so the next one we're going to answer is how do you avoid having a PBIS turn into an economy of tokenism?
I think it's how you present PBIS to students. If you make it about all the things you get, then it's going to turn into like I want to get those things. But if you're really specific about the targeted behaviors that you want to see demonstrated in students, and you notice and name those behaviors and recognize those behaviors, and the focus is on recognizing behavior, not getting And a lot of that is around like how teachers are recognizing students and making sure that they're talking about the positive things that they're doing. And then how we track how students are doing with those positive behaviors in the same ways that we would track any of the negative behaviors to see where things are going well and where we need to maybe change things up for them. And so it's more about they're proud of the behavior that they did. So when I talk to them, it's not about like the ticket that they earned. It's more about the behavior they did to get that recognition. And so I think that if you maintain that focus, then it won't become too consistent.
I think another thing is we started a leadership group this year. It's not your typical leadership group. We asked teachers to nominate those kids that other kids follow, not always in the best way, right? So there's a group of kids that have, some of them just have so much charisma. They're involved in everything, not always the most positive way. But we started that, we've got 45 kids in that, and every single one of them was nominated by a teacher because a teacher saw something in them. And so when I had a conversation with every one of those kids about, we'd like you to be part of leadership, first of all, the look on their face was like, wait, you want me to be a leader? And then when we told them that the teacher recommended them, one of my 7th graders, that pretty tough kid, brought tears to his eyes when he found out that a teacher saw something in him. And we've kind of worked with them with this notion that your voice matters. And so those kids are a part of, if we have a committee in our building, if there's a gathering of adults that's official, there's typically one of those kids there. And those kids have brought a ton of insight. And then when I get to meet with them outside of it, they're like, adults are listening. And so kids are finding out that their voice matters. And so are all those kids perfect students now? No, but they're understanding that their voice matters. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Yes. You want to say something?
What you said.
So I just want to sort of draw a connection between when we started talking about PBIS and then also about the Peace Corner. Like part of it is about prep and rollout, right? And so if we are consistent and fair and structured about the rollout of both of those systems or all of those systems, really, we could expect to get kids to behave in the ways that we hope that they will, right? Because it has good enough structure and fair, reasonable consequences, and understanding that. All right, the next question. How to confront staff about implicit bias if they haven't gone through this training?
How much time do we have?
Like 4 minutes. to solve all the bubbles.
4 minutes to solve it all.
Yep.
Okay, well, somebody else better answer. I don't know that you start by confronting people about implicit bias. If you don't have the space for that relationship to exist already, it's not the time to step into that one because you're just going to drive a further wedge in that relationship. But I do think that if you have this training and you begin to talk about kids' trauma and the fact that adults also have trauma, and then you can help adults join with the kids, that's not like join, like now this is my space, join, but join in terms of I can now understand. It can remove potentially some of the bias that they have about whether kids are doing it on purpose, trying to get back at me, want power and control in the room, and all of the other kinds of things that sort of are in line with the implicit bias, but not necessarily the direct statement. But I do think that people have to have conversations, and I think people have to have open conversations, and people have to put implicit bias on the table. And they have to be able to talk very specifically about which groups are falling prey to the bias that shows up in your buildings. But it's not necessarily the place to start if people are already resistant to having basic conversations about differences that exist amongst the kids and the kids that they serve. Oh, no, I can't say that.
Thank you. I also want to encourage the use of the implicit bias, the Harvard Implicit Bias Study. You can just Google Harvard Implicit Bias Study. I encourage this in all the schools that I'm working in everyone together in a staff meeting, bring their laptops and do it together, like not together, but each one doing it. So, and then you make it really safe by saying you're not going to share these results with anyone, but it takes 7 minutes to do these implicit bias things. And you could say, so there are implicit biases, there's like a dozen of them now. So not just black-white things, but also LGBTQI and also like empathy or empathetic. What is it? I just took it. It's emotional thinking versus analytical thinking, men versus women, kind of, not versus, but you know what I mean? Like who do you think does what? And so I really, in schools where I feel like they haven't started the conversation, I just say take any one of those. Right, not the one that I'm targeting, but that I think at that school is definitely a black thing. I'm not saying everyone needs to take that one. Just take the one that appeals to you. They each take about 7 minutes, and then you give people time to reflect. We've talked a lot about minutes, and we've given you time after each of these principles, which is often I think that teachers don't get a chance to do, to have that time. And so when administration puts it in a staff meeting and puts their time behind that, then you can see that the administration is saying, yes, we think this is an important thing that you should be working on. And then we're going to use some time to think about it, right? I think that's a way to start, especially if the conversation happens to get older.
And if I want to really do a shameless plug, Marla, raise your hand. Raise your hand like this, Marla. Marla and I and another co-worker from my district, Stacey Brandon, we do a 90-minute, you have 90 minutes to 12 hours worth of training on implicit bias.
Also that.
And we presented at CEA Summer Leadership a couple summers ago. So.
I have a quick inquiry if I could. Could I get one sentence from each of you that is a takeaway that you would like to be highlighted on the video? Throw him for a loop.
What time do we finish with this?
Oh, sorry. I thought we were done. Ignore me.
I started worrying about our relationship.
Yeah, I felt like they were winding up, so I was like, okay, cheers.
Right. All right, so the next question we're going to solve.
Everybody take it next to your
There we go. Okay, so what is an appropriate amount of time to give a student? What is an appropriate amount of time to give a student consequences without re-escalating them? Okay, so like when can we say this is the consequence without re-escalating them, but where the feedback is still timely and relevant?
Can you do the question a little bit?
Yeah, so basically it's saying how long do we wait to tell the kids what the consequences are so that they don't get re-escalated but it's still timely and relevant? Is that what whoever was the wrote that? That's what
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, good. Okay.
Sorry, I can't. Can I start?
Okay. So I think it's really individual. It really is individual in terms of who the kid is, who the other players are, and what the situation is. And so I'm thinking this is really quite timely for me because on Friday there was an incident where a student who I had an interaction with earlier in the day, unrelated to the incident that then occurred. But she was so angry at a male peer who she believed was talking about her. Now, she didn't hear explicit statements about her, but she was convinced he was talking about her. And she was just like mad and ready to fight him. And so myself, counselor, I think there were a couple of security people when I came on the scene, we just sort of, I just was like, nope, you're not gonna do this. No, 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 pumpkin, no, right? That's me. No, we're gonna walk away. That's not gonna be helpful, right? So then I'm sort of talking to her, I'm just like, no, we're not gonna do this. We ended up walking outside of the building, around another building, and back into the building. So that whole interaction was probably 20 to 25 minutes. Obviously, a classroom teacher can't do that in the moment, so they would call for some additional supports in the building. But based on then, what I was able to uncover as we walked, it went from me needing to really like hold her to like loosely to where she was just like naturally letting our arms kind of do this. But I could physically feel her body just kind of go to where she was down and she was no longer crying by the time we got back to the building. And then it became a restorative kind of conversation. So what do you think we need to do next? How are you gonna be able to be in the space with him? Well, and then the rest of it. So it's individual. That's my short answer.
It depends. I had a kid that I was trying to do a restorative justice conversation with, and he wasn't in any space about half an hour after the incident. I went to him the next day and asked him, he's like, nope. A week later, and every day I went and talked to him, a week later, he and I finally had our part of the conversation, and then was with another adult in the building, and it worked. So it's a week later, so it depends.
I think the key that you talked about right there, though, is that you went back every day. Because had you not done that, that kid would have been like, oh, he doesn't care, he's not going to come back and revisit the situation, that's not a top priority for them. So it's also about that, like, insistence that we're going to have this conversation when you're ready, and I'm going to check with you every day.
And sometimes you have to maybe do a consequence. It's not an either or, but both and. You may need a consequence. That kid may have to be away, given what the incident was again. And then during the time that they're away, potentially their brain is able to sort of recuperate some cognitive juice, so to speak, that when they come back, they're able to then process. And then you can kind of process, even though a consequence may have come first. You're still going to have to live in the same place where the incident occurred. And so sometimes it's on that end.
So yeah, can I tell a little story? So I was working with this kid, I'll just tell it anyway. I was working with a kid, I did a ton of work, I was seeing the kid 3 times with physical therapy, I was doing family therapy with his, I was also doing crisis intervention. He was a first grader, so I've been working with him a year and a half. And this teacher, who's a fabulous, fabulous first grade teacher, on this one particular day, took away his birthday. 25 cupcakes in the back of the room. In San Francisco, you can't give out cupcakes during the school day, so what they do is at the end of the day, the kid gives out the cupcakes, the kids are leaving, so it's like, anyway, she took away his birthday, right? Her rider was off her horse, and I was pissed off about it, and I went to the principal, I was like, dude, that can't happen. He was already out of the classroom, great, he was out of the classroom, but you cannot take away his birthday. So the principal went back and talked to the teacher, and she agreed that she was like, you need to let it. So he came back at the very end of the day and handed out the cupcakes. So guess how the teacher felt about that in principal intervention? Not so great, right? So we were going to have our restorative conversation about this between the kid and the teacher. So I prepped the kid. I assumed that the social worker had prepped the teacher. Don't make assumptions, people. Then we sat down in the talk it out corner, started doing the questions, and the kid said, I hurt my feelings when you took away my birthday. And the teacher said, well, wait a minute, first you did this, then you did that, then you did this, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. And the kid, this is the same repair the tear kid, he said, I don't think she's ready. I think maybe we should wait on this. And I will tell you. It took her 3 days to be ready, right? Because we came down on her. Like now I don't know if I would do that today, that same thing that I did that day. Because we came down on her with this, you must do it the way we said, right? So she wasn't ready. He was back in the classroom the next day, right? But they didn't get to have that conversation until 3 days later, right? So it does depend on all the people and who's prepping who and making sure that we have that follow-up every time, right? Okay, so we have one more written question and then we have some minutes for questions from you guys. How can we do more project-based learning when we are given a strict timeline and curriculum?
I'm a huge advocate for PBL. But understand that there are constraints, and I feel like PBL done properly is just so good for kids that I think all of our circumstances are a little bit different. But I think it's approaching it from the idea that it's good for kids because they have choice. They get to produce, show what they know. Oftentimes they can be passionate about it. They can dive into their interests. All those things. I feel like it's a conversation that needs to happen with the advocates for PBL and whoever's saying we're in a ABCD. You just got to kind of power through it. And I think there's different ways that you can navigate PBL in the time that you have. So I think that's. One of the things that I feel like has really helped us is integrating these. So the innovation, the trauma-based, the hearts work, all of it kind of coming together, and if you can identify the commonalities behind it. And I think one of the biggest things and all the things that are really good for kids are that student voice is a huge part of PBL. It's a huge part of what kids need, and choice is a huge piece of both of them. And if you can take all these different initiatives and kind of blend them into one, that's going to save you a ton of time.
So I wanted to just say, that PBL is also a thing that is part of the reason why we can't do it is because of societal oppressions and things like that. Like student voice and choice, like there are people that don't really want kids to have a voice, or actually particular kids to have a voice at all. Not you people, but people in the higher structures of things that are pushing that seat work, that worksheet work, because we don't really want our kids to creatively come up together with an idea about something they're really interested in and that they want to make change about, right? And so there's a way in which we're fighting against, you're making the fight against societal oppressions and problems when you're trying to do the PBL stuff, PBL type of work. And so I think it is a hard struggle, and it's more about the structures that are telling us they can't do it, which I think is just language to cover up what we don't want them to. I have one more question that came up. Are there any social, emotional, and trauma screeners that you would recommend for school-wide implementation? Can we just say no?
Can't take it. Obviously, like,
I think that, you don't say anything, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I think that we kind of are, I think that in general we're sort of opposed to the idea of a school-wide trauma screening because I don't think that it's, all the things we're talking about will work well for all of your students impacted by trauma or not. And so it's worth doing the practices without like having to know the details of a kid's life, which may end up somewhere where it shouldn't be or in the hands of someone who, not because they're bad people, but because they get overwhelmed by the information that, you know, that I've heard people tell things about kids and yeah, I just don't think a screener is necessary.
And I think that it's all about that relationship, right? So if you build that trusting relationship with a student, they're going to start to talk to you about things that they're comfortable talking to you about, and you'll start to learn more about them. But it's all about them being able to know how to form a healthy relationship and how to trust somebody. And so you as an adult need to be able to be there for them and do those things in ways that a screener just isn't going to give us the same information. It's like building a connection and a relationship with students.
And I would argue we don't actually need to know. Like, I can know that scary things have happened to a kid. That's all I need to know, right? Or scary things have happened in his neighborhood or her neighborhood, right? It's not really necessary for me to know exactly what things have happened until now.
Yeah. And I think sometimes experience like that can just be kids just regulated. When they come in just fine and they weren't even thinking about it, then you put the screener on the table and it's like, wait, what? And then they're triggered.
Or their parents. Because there's somewhere I heard there's a kindergarten, they were trying to get all the kinder parents to fill out at home. Like, wow, that's really hard. You know, we don't want to create a kindergarten mom. Yes.
So, what you guys were just talking about actually made me, I have a question, I guess.
Yes.
So, in an age of mandatory reporting,
Yeah.
when kids do come to you with issues and concerns, like I had a student come talk to me about a concern that I had to report on Friday, and it had taken her a year to get up the guts to like have the conversation in the first place.
Yeah.
And I immediately say to her, I have to now call the police. Like, how do we be available for kids in an era where we also we are obligated by law to report certain things? Like, where's the balance in that sometimes when they start fighting in trauma? Because I agree with you that idea, like, I don't have to know the things, but sometimes the things come out of the mouth and then you're like,
Right.
you just trusted me,
Yeah.
and now I have to bring your entire family into this.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, so as a school psychologist, obviously that's kind of my existence in many ways, right? But what I've